Most people make their loved ones' final moments infinitely harder without even realizing it. In his psychic readings, Edgar Cayce revealed that what we say and do at someone's deathbed can either liberate their soul or trap it in confusion and fear. Right now, someone you love might be closer to transition than you think, and you're likely unprepared for the most spiritually critical moment you'll ever witness. Cayce explained that death isn't a medical event, it's a sacred graduation of the soul, and those present hold immense power to either assist or obstruct this divine process. The ancient mystic taught that the energy in the room, the words spoken, even the thoughts of those gathered create the spiritual atmosphere the departing soul must navigate. Most families, drowning in grief and fear, unknowingly create exactly the conditions that make transition traumatic rather than transcendent. What you're about to discover will forever change how you understand your role in this sacred moment. Share in the comments. Have you ever been present at someone's transition, and did you feel spiritually prepared? When Edgar Cayce entered his trance states and accessed the universal consciousness, he was asked countless times about death, dying, and how the living can serve those preparing to leave their physical bodies. What he revealed challenges nearly everything modern society teaches about this sacred transition. Cayce made it absolutely clear, death is not an ending, but a doorway, and those present at someone's transition hold a spiritual responsibility so profound that most people cannot even comprehend it. Let me ask you directly, if someone you love were lying in their final hours right now, would you know what to do? Would you understand the spiritual forces at play? Or would you, like most people, fall into patterns of fear, denial, and emotional attachment that actually make their journey harder? Cayce taught that ignorance at the moment of death isn't just unfortunate. It's spiritually dangerous for both the departing soul and those left behind. In his readings, Cayce explained that as physical death approaches, the soul begins to loosen its connection to the body. This isn't a sudden event, but a gradual process, and the person transitioning becomes increasingly aware of spiritual realities invisible to those still anchored in physical consciousness. They may see deceased loved ones, perceive angels or guides, sense the light of higher dimensions calling them home. This is not hallucination or oxygen deprivation. This is the soul awakening to its true reality. Here's what Cayce revealed that most people never consider. The dying person is often far more spiritually aware than anyone else in the room. They're standing at the threshold between worlds, and they can feel everything, the fear of those around them, the resistance, the desperate clinging, and this energy directly impacts their ability to transition peacefully. Cayce taught that the first and most important thing you must do when someone is near transition is to examine your own heart. Are you holding them here out of love or out of your own fear of loss? Because there's a profound difference. True love desires the highest good for the soul, even when that means releasing them to continue their eternal journey. Selfish attachment, disguised as love, creates energetic chains that bind the departing soul to the physical realm, causing confusion and suffering. In his readings, Cayce was explicit. At the moment of death, your grief must be tempered with spiritual understanding. Crying and mourning are natural human responses, but excessive displays of anguish, hysterical sobbing, or desperate pleas for the person to stay create a spiritual battlefield. The soul, preparing to graduate to higher consciousness, feels torn between its divine calling and the emotional pull of those it loves. You think you're expressing love, but you're actually making their transition exponentially harder. What should you do instead? Cayce provided specific guidance. First, create an atmosphere of peace and spiritual elevation in the room. This means controlling your own emotions enough to maintain calm. Play soft, sacred music, if appropriate. Dim, harsh lights. Reduce noise and chaos. The dying person's consciousness is becoming hypersensitive to vibrations, and a peaceful environment supports their soul's natural ascension. Second, speak to them with spiritual truth, not fear-based denial. Even if they appear unconscious, Cayce taught that the soul hears everything. Tell them it's okay to go. Give them explicit permission to release their physical body. This might be the hardest thing you ever do, but it's an act of profound spiritual love. Say things like, "You're safe, you're loved," It's okay to go toward the light. We'll be all right. Go to God. These simple words can be the difference between a peaceful transition and a struggle. Cayce also emphasized the power of prayer during this time. Not desperate prayers begging God to prevent death, but prayers of light, protection, and guidance. Pray for angels to surround the departing soul. Pray for Jesus Christ to guide them safely home. Pray that their transition be swift, painless, and filled with divine love. According to Cayce, these prayers create a spiritual bridge of light that the soul can follow, making passage between dimensions smoother and more graceful. Here's something Cayce revealed that shocks most people. You can actually speak to the person's soul, not just their physical body. As their consciousness loosens from physical form, direct soul-to-soul communication becomes possible. You can mentally or verbally tell their soul, "I see the light coming for you. Go toward it. Don't be afraid." Your loved ones who've passed are waiting. God is calling you home. The soul receives this communication and feels supported rather than anchored by fear. Now, what should you absolutely avoid? Cayce warned against several things. Never argue, fight, or create drama in the presence of someone transitioning. Their heightened spiritual sensitivity means they absorb every negative vibration, and it disturbs their peace profoundly. Never discuss inheritance, possessions, or worldly matters. This pulls their consciousness back toward earthly attachments when they need to be releasing them. Never lie and say they're going to be fine if they're clearly dying. The soul knows the truth, and your dishonesty creates confusion. Most importantly, Cayce taught, never tell them they can't go yet, that they must stay, that you need them too much. This is spiritual cruelty disguised as love. You're asking them to cling to a deteriorating physical form to satisfy your emotional needs. Would you really want someone to suffer just so you don't have to face grief? That's not love, that's selfishness. Cayce also addressed the question many people have. Should you talk about spiritual matters with someone who wasn't particularly religious in life? His answer was clear. Yes, absolutely. Even souls who weren't consciously spiritual during physical life are spiritual beings. At the moment of death, all souls return to spiritual awareness. Speaking about God, light, Jesus, angels, this resonates with their deepest essence, regardless of their prior beliefs or lack thereof. What about reading to them? Cayce encouraged reading scriptures, particularly passages about eternal life, resurrection, and God's love. The 23rd Psalm, passages from John's Gospel about Jesus preparing a place for us, verses about perfect love casting out fear. These aren't just comforting words, they're spiritual truths that help orient the departing soul toward divine reality. The vibration of sacred scripture literally creates a protective and uplifting energy field. Let's talk about something Cayce revealed that few people understand: the critical importance of the first 3 days after physical death. According to his readings, the soul remains in close proximity to the physical plane during this time, adjusting to its new state of consciousness. Your prayers, thoughts, and intentions during these 3 days continue to support the soul's journey. Don't immediately stop talking to them spiritually just because the body has died. Continue sending love, light, and prayers. Tell their soul you're okay, you understand they've transitioned, and you wish them well on their continuing journey. But here's where Cayce's teachings become deeply challenging for most people. You must also begin releasing your own attachment. The soul can sense if you're holding onto them with grief, so intense it becomes energetic bondage. Excessive mourning can actually slow the soul's ascension through higher planes of consciousness. This doesn't mean you shouldn't grieve. Grief is natural and necessary, but it means your grief must eventually evolve into spiritual release and even celebration of the soul's graduation. Cayce taught that death is the soul's commencement ceremony, not its termination. Every soul came to earth to learn specific lessons, balance karma, and grow spiritually. Physical death means the soul has completed this particular chapter and is moving on to new learning in higher dimensions. When you truly understand this, your perspective shifts from "I lost them" to "they graduated and I'm still in school." Now, are you living in a way that prepares you for these moments? Because they're coming. Statistics guarantee it. Someone you love will transition, and you'll face the choice. Will you be a spiritually aware assistant to their soul's journey, Or will you be an unconscious obstacle? Cayce didn't teach this information merely for intellectual interest. He taught it as practical spiritual preparation for one of life's most sacred responsibilities. Think about your own death for a moment. How would you want people to treat you in your final hours? Would you want them sobbing hysterically, begging you not to go, filling the room with fear and desperation? Or would you want them calm, loving, spiritually aware, giving you permission to transition peacefully, praying for your soul's safe journey home? You already know the answer. Now live that answer by becoming the kind of presence someone else will need when their time comes. Cayce also addressed something many people experience but rarely discuss: the dying person's visions. When someone near transition starts talking about seeing deceased relatives, seeing angels, or describing beautiful places, Cayce taught that these are genuine spiritual perceptions, not hallucinations. The proper response isn't to dismiss these experiences or assume medication has caused confusion. Instead, acknowledge what they're seeing. Say, "Yes, I believe you. Tell me about it. It's beautiful that they're coming for you." This validates their spiritual experience and helps them feel less alone in the transition process. What about unfinished business? Cayce taught that if there are things unsaid, say them now. Ask for forgiveness if needed. Offer forgiveness freely. Express love clearly and simply. But don't burden the transitioning person with your regrets or demands. Keep it simple, genuine, and spiritually focused. I love you. I forgive anything that needs forgiving. I ask your forgiveness for anything I've done. You're a blessing to me. Go in peace. These few sentences can heal lifetimes of complexity. Here's a question Cayce would ask you. Are you prepared for your own transition? Because everything you're learning about supporting someone else's death applies equally to preparing for your own. Are you living in a way that will allow you to die peacefully, with spiritual confidence? Have you resolved conflicts, forgiven enemies, lived according to spiritual truth? Or are you accumulating regrets, resentments, and karmic debts that will haunt you in your final moments? Death doesn't care about your plans, your age, or your readiness. It comes when it comes. The only variable is whether you've used your time wisely to prepare spiritually. Cayce taught that the quality of your death reflects the quality of your life. If you've lived in fear, materialism, and spiritual ignorance, your death will be fearful and confused. If you've lived in faith, service, and spiritual awareness, your death will be a joyful homecoming. So let me ask you directly, right now, if you learned today that you had 1 month to live, what would you change about how you're living? What relationships would you heal? What spiritual practices would you begin? What worldly attachments would you release? Here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't know you have a month. You might have decades, or you might have days. Living as though death is far away is the ultimate spiritual procrastination. Cayce revealed that those who support dying people with spiritual wisdom don't just serve the departing soul, they also accelerate their own spiritual growth. Being present at someone's transition, done correctly, is one of the most spiritually educational experiences available in physical life. You witness the moment when spirit separates from matter. You participate in a sacred threshold crossing. You practice unconditional love under the most challenging circumstances. This transforms you, if you're spiritually awake enough to recognize it. But most people squander this opportunity entirely. They make the transition about their own pain, their own fear, their own loss. They miss the sacred dimension completely. They cry so loudly they can't hear the angels singing. They cling so desperately they can't see the light opening. And then they carry guilt and regret for years because some part of them knows they failed to show up spiritually when it mattered most. Don't be that person. Prepare now. Study these teachings. Practice meditation and prayer so you'll have those tools available when crisis comes. Work on releasing your own fear of death so you won't project that fear onto someone else. Learn to distinguish between love and attachment, between supporting and clinging, between honoring and holding back. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. This channel exists to share Edgar Cayce's authentic spiritual wisdom with people who are serious about spiritual growth. By subscribing, you're supporting the mission of bringing genuine metaphysical truth to those ready to receive it. Cayce taught one more critical truth: you cannot give what you don't have. If you haven't cultivated inner peace, you can't create peaceful atmosphere for someone dying. If you haven't developed faith, you can't speak confidently about spiritual reality. If you haven't practiced unconditional love, you can't release someone with grace. This means your preparation for supporting someone else's transition is actually about your own spiritual development right now, today, in this moment. Are you meditating regularly? Are you praying? Are you studying spiritual truth? Are you practicing forgiveness? Are you releasing material attachments? Are you cultivating awareness of eternal reality beyond physical form? These aren't abstract spiritual exercises. They're practical preparation for the most important moments you'll ever face, both when supporting others and when facing your own death. Here's what Cayce would ask you if he could speak to you right now. What are you doing with the time you have left? Not someday, not when you're older, right now. Because the soul's purpose isn't fulfilled in fantasy or procrastination, it's fulfilled in conscious, committed spiritual living today. When someone you love is near transition, they're also offering you a gift, though you might not recognize it. They're showing you your own future. You will be in that bed someday. You will face that threshold. You will release your physical body and step into spiritual dimensions. The question is, will you be ready? Will you have lived in a way that makes death a graduation rather than a tragedy? Cayce's teachings aren't meant to make you comfortable. They're meant to wake you up. Death is real. It's coming for everyone in this video, including you. But death doesn't have to be fearful or traumatic. It can be beautiful, peaceful, and transcendent if you prepare spiritually, and if those around you understand their sacred role. So please, take this seriously. Share this video with people you love. Have conversations about death before crisis forces them. Make spiritual agreements with family members about how you'll support each other when the time comes. And most importantly, live every day in a way that prepares your own soul for its inevitable transition. Like this video if Cayce's wisdom resonates with you. Subscribe to this channel for more authentic spiritual teachings that challenge you to grow. And comment below, what will you do differently now that you understand the spiritual dynamics of death and dying? Share your reflections, your experiences, your questions. This community exists for people brave enough to face life's deepest spiritual truths together. The moment of death is the most sacred threshold any soul crosses during earthly existence. Edgar Cayce devoted significant portions of his psychic readings to ensuring people understood this spiritual truth. Now you know. Now you're responsible for that knowledge. The question is, what will you do with it? Will you continue living unconsciously, or will you begin preparing spiritually for the most important moment of your life and the lives of those you love? That choice is yours, and that choice starts right now. What if everything you've been taught about Christmas, the gifts, the traditions, the celebration itself, has been keeping you from experiencing the most profound spiritual transformation available to humanity? Edgar Cayce, the most documented psychic in American history, spent decades in deep trance states accessing universal wisdom, and what he revealed about the true meaning of Christmas isn't just beautiful, it's a blueprint for your soul's awakening. The birth we celebrate on December 25th wasn't meant to be remembered as a historical event 2,000 years ago. According to Cayce's readings, it's an eternal spiritual process that must happen inside you, right now, in this lifetime. The Christ child isn't waiting in ancient Bethlehem. He's waiting at the door of your heart, and whether he's born there or not depends entirely on choices you're making today. If this message resonates with something deep inside you, something that's been calling you toward a more authentic spiritual life, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Let's awaken together. The manger was never just wood and straw in an ancient stable. In Edgar Cayce's spiritual readings, he revealed that the nativity scene is actually a cosmic diagram of what must occur within every human soul. Mary represents your higher consciousness, pure, receptive, willing to say yes to the divine even when it makes no logical sense. Joseph symbolizes your earthly mind, protective, practical, sometimes doubting, but ultimately faithful. The manger itself is your heart, and the question Cayce would ask you right now is this: is your heart still empty, or are you finally ready to let Christ be born there? Most people celebrate Christmas by looking backward at something that happened long ago to someone else in a faraway land. But Cayce's readings shatter this comfortable distance. He taught that the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem was a demonstration, a showing forth of what the universe intends for every single soul. The Christ consciousness, that perfect union of human and divine, that complete surrender to love as the organizing principle of existence, isn't Jesus's exclusive possession. It's your destiny. It's what you were created to achieve. The only question is whether you'll cooperate with that destiny or resist it for another lifetime. Think about how we typically approach Christmas. We buy gifts, attend parties, follow traditions passed down through generations. We feel nostalgic. We feel generous, at least temporarily, but how many of us actually pause and ask, am I allowing the same spiritual birth that happened in Mary to happen in me? Cayce would say that until Christmas becomes personal, until it's about your transformation, not just a historical commemoration, you're missing the entire point. You're celebrating someone else's spiritual breakthrough while your own soul remains unborn. Here's what Cayce revealed in his readings that most churches won't tell you. The virgin birth isn't primarily about Mary's physical virginity. It's about the consciousness required to birth the divine. A virgin consciousness means one that hasn't been corrupted by ego, by selfishness, by the endless calculations of what's in it for me. When Mary said, "Let it be unto me according to thy word," she was demonstrating the ultimate spiritual posture, complete receptivity to God's will, even when it disrupts everything she thought her life would be. Are you virgin in that sense? Is your consciousness pure enough, open enough, surrendered enough to allow God to be born through you? The angels appeared to shepherds, not to kings or priests. Cayce explained this wasn't random. Shepherds represent those who care for the vulnerable, who serve without recognition, who stay awake through dark nights, watching over others. The angels, those messengers of higher dimensions that Cayce accessed regularly in his readings, don't announce divine births to the self-important or the spiritually complacent. They announce them to those whose lives already demonstrate love in action. So here's an uncomfortable question. If angels were scouting the earth right now looking for people ready to receive a divine announcement, would they find you? Or would they find you too distracted, too self-absorbed, too comfortable in your spiritual mediocrity? Cayce taught that the Star of Bethlehem wasn't just a celestial phenomenon. It was a symbol of spiritual guidance available to all who genuinely seek truth. The wise men followed that star, but notice what they had to do. They had to leave their comfortable kingdoms, traverse dangerous territories, trust a light that others couldn't or wouldn't see. The star led them to a baby in poverty, not to a palace. It led them to humility, not to power. What star is shining in your consciousness right now, trying to guide you toward your own spiritual birth? And are you following it, or are you ignoring it because the path seems too difficult, too strange, too different from what everyone around you is doing? The gifts the wise men brought, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, weren't random either. In Cayce's interpretation, gold represents your material resources, frankincense symbolizes your worship and spiritual practice, and myrrh signifies your willingness to embrace sacrifice and death to the ego. The question is, what are you bringing to the manger of your own heart? Are you offering God your wealth, your devotion, your very self? Or are you showing up to Christmas empty-handed spiritually, expecting to receive without giving, expecting transformation without surrender? Now let's talk about what Cayce said about forgiveness, because this is where Christmas becomes devastatingly practical. In his readings, Cayce explained that holding on to resentment, grudges, and unforgiveness creates karmic chains that bind you to certain people and situations across multiple lifetimes. You don't just carry your unforgiveness into your next life. It actually determines who you'll encounter there and what painful lessons you'll have to learn. Christmas, the celebration of God forgiving humanity by entering into our suffering, is your annual invitation to break those chains. Who do you need to forgive? Not the easy forgivenesses, not the surface ones, but the deep, bone-level forgiveness that releases someone who genuinely hurt you. That person's face just appeared in your mind, didn't it? Cayce would tell you that your spiritual evolution is literally stuck until you release them. And Christmas is the universe handing you the key. But here's what makes Cayce's teaching on forgiveness so different from conventional religious platitudes. He explained that forgiveness isn't primarily for the other person's benefit. When you forgive, you're not doing them a favor. You're liberating yourself from energetic entanglements that are literally preventing your soul from advancing. Every moment you spend in bitterness is a moment you're unavailable for the Christ consciousness to be born in you. The manger of your heart is occupied by resentment, leaving no room for the divine. So forgiveness isn't optional spiritual extra credit. According to Cayce, it's the prerequisite for everything else. Let's go deeper into what Cayce meant by Christ consciousness, because this is the heart of everything. Christ consciousness isn't a religious concept belonging exclusively to Christians. It's a state of being where you recognize that you and the divine are not separate, where love becomes your default response to everything, where serving others feels as natural as breathing because you recognize the divine in every person you encounter. Jesus didn't come to start a religion. Cayce's readings make this clear. Jesus came to demonstrate what every human being is supposed to become, a perfect channel for divine love, wisdom, and creative power. The tragedy is that most people worship Jesus instead of following him. They put him on a pedestal so high that they never have to actually attempt what he demonstrated. Oh, he was special. He was different. He was the only begotten Son of God. I could never do what he did. But Cayce's readings directly contradict this convenient excuse. Jesus himself said, "Greater works than these shall you do," and Cayce explained that this wasn't hyperbole. It was a promise and a challenge. The Christ consciousness that was fully manifested in Jesus is meant to be progressively manifested in you, and the birth of Jesus is the universe saying, "This is possible, this is the template, now follow it." Service to others is where Christmas stops being a concept and becomes a reality. Cayce taught that spiritual growth without practical service is meaningless, even dangerous. You can meditate for hours, study esoteric texts, develop psychic abilities, and still be spiritually bankrupt if you're not actually loving people in concrete, practical ways. Notice how the Christmas story is full of service. Mary serving as the vessel for divine incarnation, Joseph serving and protecting his family, the shepherds serving their flocks, the wise men serving by offering their gifts. Everyone in the nativity scene is serving someone or something beyond themselves. So here's where this gets personal. Who are you serving? Not in the abstract, not in theory, but today, this week, this month. Is your spiritual life just about your enlightenment, your growth, your experiences? Because if it is, Cayce would say you've completely misunderstood the path. The Christ consciousness is fundamentally about recognizing yourself in every other being and therefore naturally serving their highest good. It's not sacrifice in the painful sense. It's the overflowing of love that can't help but give. If you're not serving, you're not growing. Period. The baby Jesus grew up to wash his disciples' feet. What are you willing to do? Love, in Cayce's teaching, isn't a feeling. It's the fundamental creative force of the universe. Everything that exists was brought into being by love. When Cayce said, "God is love," he meant this literally, not poetically. Love isn't something God does or has. Love is what God is. And Christmas celebrates the moment when that infinite, creative, all-powerful love compressed itself into human form to show you what you're made of. You're not just loved by God, you're made of God's love. Your essential nature is love itself, though it's been covered over by layers of fear, selfishness, and separation. This is why Cayce taught that every act of genuine love, no matter how small, is an act of creation. When you love authentically, you're literally participating in the same creative force that brought the universe into existence. You're not just being nice, you're wielding divine power. Every moment you choose love over fear, generosity over hoarding, compassion over judgment, you're allowing the Christ to be born a little more fully in your consciousness. And every moment you choose the opposite, you're delaying your own spiritual birth. The Christmas story includes the slaughter of the innocents, Herod's massacre of children trying to eliminate the Christ child. This dark element is usually glossed over in sentimental Christmas celebrations, but Cayce would say it's essential to understanding the spiritual path. Whenever something genuinely divine tries to be born in your consciousness, the Herod energy within you, your ego, your attachment to the old self, your resistance to change, will attempt to destroy it. The ego senses that this new consciousness threatens its dominance, and it will use every trick to abort the process. Have you noticed this? Every time you get serious about spiritual growth, suddenly there are obstacles, distractions, temptations to fall back into old patterns. That's not coincidence, that's the Herod in your psyche trying to maintain control. But just as the Christ child escaped to Egypt and eventually fulfilled his mission, your own divine potential can't ultimately be destroyed. It can be delayed, ignored, denied, but never eliminated, because it's who you truly are beneath all the layers of false identity. Cayce's readings promise that everyone eventually will achieve Christ consciousness. The only variable is how many lifetimes it will take. How much more suffering do you need before you stop running from your own divinity? Let me share something Cayce revealed that's both terrifying and liberating. You're creating your entire reality with every thought you think. The mind, Cayce taught, is the builder. Spirit provides the pattern, mind does the building, and physical reality is the result. This means that your outer life, your relationships, your circumstances, your body's health, everything, is a materialization of your habitual thought patterns. Christmas is the celebration of a thought, God's thought of perfect love, becoming flesh. And Cayce would ask you, what thoughts are you making flesh? What are you creating with the divine creative power that flows through your consciousness every moment? If your life feels limited, stuck, painful, it's not because God is punishing you or because you're unlucky. It's because somewhere in your consciousness, you're holding thoughts, beliefs, and emotional patterns that are creating those limitations. This is why Cayce was so insistent that spiritual development must include mental discipline. You can't birth the Christ within while your mind is polluted with resentment, fear, judgment, and negativity. The manger must be cleaned before the holy birth can occur. Right now, in this moment, you have the most profound choice available to any human being. Will you finally say yes to your own spiritual birth? Will you stop waiting for perfect conditions, for more knowledge, for some magical future moment when it will be easier? Mary didn't have perfect conditions. She was young, poor, unmarried, facing social disgrace and possible death by stoning. But she said yes anyway. Joseph didn't understand what was happening, but he stayed faithful anyway. The shepherds left their flocks vulnerable to pursue the angelic announcement anyway. The wise men abandoned their safe kingdoms anyway. What's your anyway? What's the thing you know you need to do spiritually, even though it's difficult? Even though it's scary, even though no one around you will understand? That's your yes to the divine birth. That's your participation in the Christmas mystery. And until you speak that yes, until you take that step, Christmas remains someone else's story instead of your own living transformation. Cayce taught that the second coming of Christ that religious people wait for isn't primarily an external event where Jesus returns in the clouds. It's an internal event where Christ consciousness is finally born in humanity collectively. And that collective birth depends on individual births, on people like you finally awakening to who you really are and what you're really here to do. You're not just watching the spiritual evolution of the planet. You're either contributing to it or hindering it. There's no neutral ground. Think about the stable where Jesus was born. Not a palace, not a temple, not a place of honor. A stable, smelly, humble, full of animals, considered unclean by religious standards. Cayce would say this is crucial. The divine isn't born in your perfectly organized spiritual life, in your impressive knowledge, in your reputation as a good person. It's born in the messy, humble, animal parts of yourself that you've been trying to hide. It's born when you finally stop pretending to have it all together and open your broken, imperfect, struggling heart to grace. The stable of your authentic self, with all its messiness and vulnerability, is the exact right place for a holy birth. So many people make spirituality into another achievement project, another way to prove their worth. They collect teachings, attend workshops, develop practices, all while missing the simplicity of what Cayce taught. Love God, love yourself, love your neighbor as yourself. That's it. Everything else is commentary. The Christ consciousness isn't complex, it's just radical, because it asks you to actually love the people who are difficult, to actually forgive the ones who hurt you, to actually serve those who can't repay you, to actually trust God even when circumstances look terrible, simple but not easy. Here's a teaching from Cayce that might disturb you. There are no accidents. Everything you're experiencing, the family you were born into, the challenges you face, the people who hurt you, the opportunities you've had or haven't had, all of it is precisely calibrated for your soul's growth. You chose this life, these circumstances, before you were born because your soul knew exactly what lessons you needed to learn. Christmas celebrates the soul of Jesus, choosing to incarnate into difficult circumstances for a redemptive purpose. Your life too has a redemptive purpose, even if you can't see it yet, especially in the parts that hurt most. What if you stopped seeing yourself as a victim of your circumstances and started seeing yourself as a soul who carefully selected these exact challenges as your curriculum for awakening? That shift in perspective, from victim to voluntary student, is itself a movement toward Christ consciousness. Jesus didn't curse the cross. He accepted it as part of his mission. What cross are you carrying right now? And what if it's not your burden but your privilege, your particular path to embodying divine love? The transformation Cayce described isn't about becoming someone different. It's about remembering who you've always been beneath the layers of forgetting. You're not trying to achieve Christ consciousness as if it's something foreign to your nature. You're trying to remove everything that's covering it up. The fears, the resentments, the false beliefs, the identification with your limited self. You're not building something new, you're excavating something ancient and eternal that's been buried. This Christmas you're being offered the same choice that's been offered every Christmas of your life and every Christmas of every lifetime you've lived. The divine wants to be born in you. Grace is available. Love is reaching for you. The question isn't whether God is willing. The question is whether you're ready. Are you ready to stop living from ego and start living from spirit? Are you ready to stop protecting yourself and start giving yourself away in service? Are you ready to forgive the unforgivable, love the unlovable, believe the impossible? Most people will hear this message and feel moved for a moment, maybe even cry a little, and then return to exactly the same life they were living before. The ego is brilliant at using spiritual inspiration as entertainment without allowing it to cause actual change. Cayce would tell you that this listening itself is a crossroads. You can treat this as interesting information to be filed away, or you can recognize it as the universe's direct communication to your soul about what you're here to do. The baby in the manger didn't stay a baby. He grew up and lived a life that completely embodied what he taught, even unto death. The birth is just the beginning. Your spiritual birth, if you allow it, is just the beginning of a life that will look increasingly different from the one you've been living. You'll make different choices. You'll value different things. You'll be able to love in ways that currently seem impossible to you. But it starts with a yes. It starts with a willingness to let the old self die so the true self can be born. Cayce promised that no sincere effort toward spiritual growth is ever wasted. Every meditation, every act of kindness, every moment of choosing love over fear is cumulative. Nothing is lost. You're building spiritual momentum across lifetimes, and at some point, maybe this lifetime, maybe this year, maybe this Christmas, that momentum reaches critical mass and something shifts permanently. You break through, the Christ is born, and you finally understand what all the ancient teachers were pointing toward. So here's my challenge to you, and it comes straight from the spirit of what Cayce taught. Don't just watch this video and move on. Take the 3 actions that Christmas is really calling you to. First, forgive someone. Really forgive them. Release them. Wish them well even if they never apologize or change. Second, serve someone. Find a person or cause that needs help and give without expecting anything in return. Third, surrender something. Whatever you're clutching tightly that you know is preventing your spiritual growth, consciously offer it to God and ask for the strength to release it. These 3 actions, forgiveness, service, surrender, are how the Christ is born in practical terms. Not through more knowledge, not through more spiritual experiences, but through actually embodying divine love in these specific ways. And here's what Cayce would guarantee. If you actually do these 3 things with sincerity, your life will change. Not might change, not could change, will change. Because you'll have created space for the divine to move, and the divine never refuses an open invitation. This Christmas can be different, not because the decorations are prettier or the food is better or you got the gifts you wanted, but because you are different, because you finally stopped celebrating someone else's spiritual breakthrough and had your own. Because the Christ who was born 2,000 years ago in Bethlehem is finally being born right now, today, in you. The manger is ready. The angels are singing. The star is shining. The only missing element is your yes. Will you say it? Will you finally, truly, completely say yes to your own spiritual birth? The universe is waiting. God is waiting. Your true self is waiting. And this moment, right now reading these words, could be the moment everything changes. Don't let another Christmas pass while you sleep through your own transformation. Wake up, say yes, let the birth happen, and then share this message with someone else who's ready, because this awakening was never meant to be private. It's meant to spread like light spreading through darkness, one soul igniting another, until the whole world finally understands what Christmas really means. The true spiritual meaning of Christmas is this: you are the manger and you're meant to birth the divine. Stop waiting. Start now. Say yes. And watch what God does with a surrendered heart. Death isn't what you think it is. And the first 3 seconds after your heart stops will prove everything Edgar Cayce revealed about the afterlife is absolutely real. In his psychic readings, Cayce described with stunning precision what consciousness experiences in those initial moments when the silver cord breaks and your soul separates from your physical body. And what he revealed contradicts nearly everything you've been taught about dying. The transition isn't instant darkness, isn't judgment, isn't nothingness. It's the most vivid, aware moment you will ever experience, where you'll see your entire physical body from outside, while simultaneously feeling more alive than you've ever felt. This isn't speculation. Cayce accessed this knowledge through the Akashic records themselves, describing immediate afterlife with medical precision. Are you prepared for what awaits, or are you living as if death won't demand an accounting of your time in flesh? Share below. If you knew what happens in those first moments after death, what would you change right now? Your last heartbeat isn't an ending, it's an awakening. Edgar Cayce's readings reveal something that will fundamentally alter how you understand death. The moment your physical heart stops, your consciousness doesn't dim or fade. It explodes into a heightened state of awareness, more vivid and real than anything you've experienced in your entire physical lifetime. Cayce described this transition with extraordinary detail through his psychic readings, and what he revealed should transform how you live every single day you have left in this body. In the first moments after death, you don't lose consciousness, you gain it. Cayce explained that the soul, your true self, doesn't depend on your physical brain to be aware, to think, to perceive. The instant the silver cord connecting your soul to your body severs, you'll find yourself hovering above your own physical form, looking down at it with crystal clarity. You'll see the room, the people around you, hear their conversations, witness their reactions. But you'll experience all of this from a completely new vantage point. You are no longer confined to the limited sensory perception of flesh. You're experiencing reality as your soul always has, just without the dense filter of physical matter dampening the signal. This isn't a dream state or hallucination. Cayce emphasized that this is you at your most lucid, most aware, most truly yourself. Think about that for a moment. The real you, the eternal consciousness that has lived multiple lifetimes, that chose this particular incarnation, that selected the lessons and relationships and challenges you'd face, that self emerges fully conscious the second the body releases it. And in that heightened state, you'll remember things. You'll remember why you came to Earth this time. You'll remember the soul agreements you made before birth. You'll remember the mission you chose, the growth you committed to pursue, the specific spiritual development you promised to achieve in this lifetime. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. In those first moments of full soul awareness, you'll also know with absolute clarity whether you fulfilled that mission or not. Cayce revealed that there's no external judge waiting to condemn you. The judgment is internal, immediate, and inescapable. Your own soul, operating with perfect memory of what you intended to accomplish, becomes acutely aware of how you actually spent your time in flesh. Did you pursue the spiritual growth you came here for, Or did you get distracted by material accumulation and ego gratification? Did you develop the compassion and service you promised to cultivate? Or did you spend decades protecting yourself from vulnerability? Did you use your unique gifts to serve others and glorify God? Or did you bury those talents in fear and self-doubt? In Cayce's readings, he described how souls in these first moments often experience shock, not at being dead, but at being so fully alive and aware, and simultaneously confronted with how much time they wasted on things that don't matter at all from the soul's perspective. The house you worried about, the promotion you obsessed over, the grudges you nursed, the image you carefully curated, all of it becomes instantly, obviously meaningless. What matters is who you became, how you loved, whether you moved closer to Christ consciousness or remained trapped in ego consciousness. You'll see your life review beginning almost immediately, not in some distant hall of judgment, but right there in those first moments. Cayce explained that the Akashic records, the complete energetic recording of every thought, word, and action you've ever expressed, becomes accessible to your conscious awareness. You won't just remember what you did, you'll re-experience it from every perspective. When you spoke harsh words to someone, you'll feel exactly what they felt receiving those words. When you showed unexpected kindness, you'll experience the ripple effect of that kindness through that person's life and the lives they touched. When you made choices driven by fear instead of love, you'll perceive clearly the opportunities for growth you missed, the connections you failed to make, the service you could have rendered but didn't. This is simultaneously the most liberating and most confronting experience a soul can have. Liberation because you're finally free from the heavy, limiting physical body and operating in your true spiritual form. Confronting because you're witnessing your life with perfect honesty and there's no more hiding from yourself. Cayce was clear that in these initial moments, you're still very much connected to the physical plane. You can see the hospital room, your home, your loved ones. Many souls don't immediately realize they're dead. They try to speak to people who can no longer hear them. They reach out to comfort grieving family members who can't feel their touch. This transition period, where you're no longer in the body, but not yet fully transitioned to the next plane, is where souls often linger if they have unfinished business or strong emotional attachments to the physical world. But for souls who lived with spiritual awareness, who regularly practiced meditation and prayer, who worked consciously on their spiritual development, Cayce revealed that these souls move through this transition much more smoothly. They recognize what's happening immediately. They're not shocked by the continuation of consciousness because they already knew, believed, and practiced living as a soul inhabiting a body rather than a body that somehow generates consciousness. They've already been preparing for this moment through their daily spiritual practice. This is where your life right now matters profoundly. How you're living today is determining your experience in those crucial first moments after death. If you've spent years numbing yourself to spiritual reality through constant distraction, materialism, and ego identification, that confusion will absolutely carry over into your initial death experience. You'll be disoriented, possibly frightened, likely resistant to accepting what's happening. But if you've been living consciously as a soul, practicing presence, meditation, prayer, service, if you've been doing the inner work to remember who you really are, then death becomes what it was always meant to be, a graduation, a promotion, a return home. Cayce described how souls who are spiritually prepared are often greeted in these first moments by guides, angels, and loved ones who have passed before. These beings of light appear to help orient the newly transitioned soul, to reassure them, to help them understand what's happening and what comes next. But here's something crucial that Cayce emphasized. These helpers can only assist souls who are ready to receive assistance. A soul trapped in denial, clinging desperately to physical existence, won't even perceive these loving presences trying to help them. Their own fear and resistance creates a barrier. And this brings us to the heart of what Edgar Cayce was really trying to tell us. Death is not the problem. Death is just a transition, a doorway, a natural progression of consciousness. The problem is living unconsciously, wasting your time in physical form, failing to do the spiritual work you came here to do. Because that failure doesn't just affect your physical lifetime, It affects your initial death experience, your life review, your progression on the other side, and the conditions you'll face in your next incarnation. Every single day you're making choices that will directly impact what you experience in those first moments after your heart stops. When you choose ego over spirit, comfort over growth, fear over love, distraction over presence, you're programming your consciousness for confusion and regret at the moment of transition. But when you choose differently, when you live with awareness that you're a spiritual being having a human experience, when you prioritize soul growth and service over material accumulation and status, you're preparing yourself for a peaceful, conscious, even joyful transition. Cayce revealed that highly evolved souls often experience their death as a beautiful release, a shedding of limitation, an expansion into freedom. They're not shocked or disoriented because they've been practicing dying while alive, dying to ego, dying to fear, dying to attachment, so that physical death is just one more release, one more expansion, one more step toward ultimate reunion with the divine. Right now, in this moment, you have the opportunity to transform how you'll experience death. Not by fearing it, not by obsessing over it, but by living in such a way that when that moment comes, your soul is ready. When you practice meditation, you're practicing the state of consciousness you'll enter at death. When you serve others selflessly, you're storing up spiritual treasures that will be waiting for you on the other side. When you forgive, when you love, when you choose compassion over judgment, you're literally shaping the quality of your consciousness, and that consciousness is exactly what you're taking with you when you die. In his readings, Cayce was asked many times about what happens after those initial moments. Where does the soul go next? What determines that destination? And his answers always pointed back to the same core truth. You go where your consciousness has prepared you to go. If you've spent your life developing Christ consciousness, unconditional love, selfless service, surrender to divine will, then you'll naturally gravitate toward higher spiritual planes where beings of similar consciousness dwell. If you've spent your life trapped in lower consciousness, fear, hatred, selfishness, materialism, then you'll find yourself in corresponding spiritual planes until you're ready to grow beyond them. This isn't punishment. It's perfect spiritual law, like attracts like. Your consciousness seeks its own level. You literally cannot enter spiritual planes of existence that vibrate at frequencies your consciousness hasn't developed the capacity to match. It would be like trying to live at the top of Mount Everest without acclimatizing. The environment would be incompatible with your current state. But here's the beautiful truth Cayce consistently emphasized. No soul is ever abandoned, and growth is always possible. Even souls who find themselves in lower spiritual planes after death have helpers, opportunities for learning, and pathways to advancement. The universe is set up for spiritual evolution, not spiritual stagnation. Every experience, whether in physical life or between lives, is ultimately designed to help souls grow closer to remembering their true nature as expressions of the divine. So what should you do with this knowledge? How should understanding what happens immediately after death change how you live right now? First, stop living as if you have unlimited time. You don't. Every day you waste on trivial pursuits, petty grievances, and ego games is a day you'll regret when you're reviewing your life with soul-level clarity. Cayce's readings make it clear that the biggest regret souls have isn't what they did. It's what they failed to do, who they failed to become, the love they failed to express. Second, develop a daily spiritual practice now. Learn to meditate, practice prayer, study spiritual wisdom, work on being present and conscious. These aren't optional extras for spiritual people. They're essential preparation for the most important transition you'll ever make. The consciousness you cultivate daily is the consciousness you'll have at death. If your consciousness right now is scattered, distracted, and identified with ego, that's what you'll have to work with when you die. But if you're training your consciousness now to be still, centered, and connected to spirit, that preparation will serve you profoundly. Third, live your mission. You came to Earth this time for specific reasons, with specific gifts to share, specific lessons to learn, specific contributions to make. Deep down, you know what your soul came here to do. Stop making excuses. Stop waiting for perfect conditions. Stop letting fear or laziness or self-doubt prevent you from becoming who you're meant to be. When you see your life review, you'll know with devastating clarity whether you honored your soul's purpose or betrayed it through inaction. Fourth, prioritize relationships and service over achievement and accumulation. In those first moments after death, you won't care about your bank balance, your job title, your possessions, or your social media following. You'll care about who you loved, how you served, whether you made people's lives better or worse through your presence. Cayce's readings consistently emphasize that we take nothing with us except what we've given away. The love we've shared, the service we've rendered, the spiritual development we've achieved. And finally, forgive. Release grudges. Let go of resentment. Heal broken relationships where possible. Because carrying that heavy energy into death creates barriers to your spiritual progression. Souls who die harboring hatred, resentment, or unforgiveness often find themselves trapped in those very emotions on the other side, unable to move forward until they release what they're clinging to. Why waste a single day holding on to poison that will only contaminate your consciousness at the moment when clarity matters most? Edgar Cayce's gift to humanity wasn't just revealing what happens after death. It was showing us how to live consciously now, in preparation for that inevitable transition. He demonstrated through thousands of readings that death isn't the enemy. Unconscious living is. Death is simply the moment when all pretense falls away and you see yourself as you truly are, evaluated not by external standards, but by your own soul's perfect knowing of what you came here to accomplish. Before we close, take a moment to truly consider this. If you died tonight, if your heart stopped in the next hour, would you be ready for what Cayce described? Would you be prepared to see your life with absolute clarity, to experience every consequence of your choices, to account for how you spent this precious gift of incarnation? Or would you be shocked, regretful, desperately wishing for more time to do what you know you should have been doing all along? You don't have to wait for death to wake up. That awakening can happen right now. You can choose in this very moment to start living as the conscious spiritual being you truly are. You can decide today that your remaining time in this body will be spent on what actually matters: soul growth, loving service, spiritual development, fulfilling your unique mission. If you found value in these insights from Edgar Cayce's readings, honor that value by hitting the like button and subscribing to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, because part of your spiritual mission might be helping others wake up to their own spiritual nature and destiny. Most importantly, leave a comment sharing what resonated with you most. Did this change how you think about death? Did it inspire you to make different choices in life? Your engagement helps this message reach others who are seeking authentic spiritual truth in a world full of superficial teachings. We're building a community of souls committed to conscious living and spiritual awakening. Your voice matters in that collective journey. The truth is, you're dying right now. Every breath brings you closer to that moment of transition. But you're also living right now, and what you choose to do with this awareness will determine everything. Edgar Cayce spent his life trying to wake people up to spiritual reality, not to frighten them, but to free them. Free them from unconscious living, from wasted time, from the tragedy of reaching the end of this lifetime and realizing they never really began. You know what your soul came here to do. Stop pretending you don't. Stop waiting for permission, for perfect timing, for ideal circumstances. Start living from soul consciousness now, today, this moment. Because when your heart does stop, when those first 3 seconds of heightened awareness arrive, the question won't be whether you believed in life after death. The question will be whether you truly lived before death, and whether the life you lived was worthy of the eternal soul you've always been. The moment your heart stops beating, you don't cease to exist. According to Edgar Cayce's psychic readings, you enter the most crucial transition period your soul will ever experience, and what happens in these first 7 days will determine whether you ascend to higher spiritual dimensions or remain trapped in confusion between worlds. Most people die completely unprepared for what Cayce called the greatest journey, unaware that their consciousness doesn't fade but actually intensifies, that they'll face immediate choices with eternal consequences, and that the life they lived determines whether they recognize the beings of light coming to guide them or mistake them for strangers. In his trance states, Cayce revealed that the newly departed soul experiences a rapid life review, encounters departed loved ones who serve as spiritual guides, and must navigate through what he described as planes of consciousness that exist just beyond our physical perception. Yet here's what disturbs most people. The majority of souls become disoriented in these first days because they never prepared spiritually, never understood that death is not an ending, but a birth into dimensions where thought creates reality instantaneously. Are you living in a way that would allow you to navigate this transition consciously? Or would you be among the confused souls Cayce described, clinging to earthly attachments and unable to recognize the divine assistance being offered? Share in the comments what aspect of this 7-day journey challenges your current understanding of death most profoundly. When Edgar Cayce entered his prophetic trance state and explored the mystery of death, he didn't describe it as a termination of consciousness, but as the soul's graduation from physical school into realms where spiritual laws govern everything. His readings painted a picture so detailed, so consistent across thousands of sessions, that it stands as one of the most comprehensive maps of the afterlife ever channeled. But here's what makes these first 7 days after death so critical. They represent a threshold period when the soul is most vulnerable, most in need of spiritual understanding, and most likely to either ascend smoothly toward divine reunion or become trapped in what Cayce called the borderland between physical and spiritual existence. The very first moment after your final heartbeat is not darkness, not unconsciousness, not the nothingness that materialists expect. Cayce revealed that consciousness actually expands in that instant. The soul, freed from the dense vibration of matter, suddenly perceives with a clarity it never knew in physical form. Colors become more vivid than anything seen with physical eyes. Sounds carry spiritual meaning beyond mere noise. And most significantly, thought becomes creative force. Whatever you think, you begin to experience, because you've entered dimensions where mind shapes reality directly. But this expanded awareness comes with a challenge that Cayce emphasized repeatedly. The soul must recognize that it has died. This might sound obvious, yet Cayce's readings revealed that countless souls refuse to accept their transition. They feel so alive, so conscious, so present that they cannot comprehend they've left their body. They see their physical form lying motionless, and their mind creates elaborate explanations. They're having a vivid dream, they've fainted, they're experiencing a medical emergency. This denial, Cayce warned, can trap a soul in confusion for extended periods, unable to move forward because it won't acknowledge the truth of its new state. In these initial hours after death, something remarkable happens that Cayce described across hundreds of readings. The silver cord that connected soul to body throughout physical life finally severs completely. During life, this cord allowed the soul to travel in sleep states and return to the body. In those first moments after death, it begins to dissolve, and as it does, the soul experiences a growing lightness, a sense of freedom that some find exhilarating and others find terrifying. Those who lived with spiritual awareness recognize this liberation. Those who identified completely with their physical existence feel as if they're losing themselves, fragmenting, ceasing to be. By the end of the first day, Cayce revealed, the soul typically encounters what he called helpers or guides, spiritual beings who come to assist with the transition. For some, these appear as departed loved ones, recognizable souls who crossed over before. For others, they manifest as beings of pure light, angels in the truest sense. But here's the critical detail Cayce stressed. The soul's spiritual development during physical life determines whether it recognizes these helpers as friends or perceives them as strangers to be feared. A person who never contemplated spiritual reality, who never considered that consciousness continues beyond death, often cannot comprehend these encounters and may withdraw in confusion or suspicion. The second and third days bring what Cayce described as the life review, though not in the judgmental sense many religions teach. This isn't a courtroom where an external judge condemns or approves. Instead, the soul experiences its entire life from a completely new perspective. You don't just remember what you did, you feel what others felt because of your actions. Every kindness you showed, you now experience as the recipient experienced it. The warmth, the gratitude, the ripple effects of love. Every cruelty you inflicted, you now feel as your victim felt it. The pain, the betrayal, the damage to their soul. This is the true meaning of karma revealed, not as punishment from above, but as the soul's own recognition of the energy it created during physical life. During this review, which can seem to last moments or eternities, depending on the soul's perception, certain lifetime patterns become illuminated with crystal clarity. You see the moments when you chose love over fear, when you chose fear over love. You recognize the relationships that were soul contracts, agreements made before birth to help each other grow spiritually. You understand why certain difficult people entered your life. They were teachers, however harsh, helping you develop qualities your soul needed to evolve. And you see often with devastating clarity the opportunities you missed, the purposes you left unfulfilled, the love you withheld when you could have given it freely. Are you living right now in a way that would make this life review a celebration or a source of deep regret? Would you discover that you spent your physical life pursuing things that hold no value in spiritual dimensions? Status, accumulation, victories over others? Or would you see a pattern of service, of consciousness expansion, of choosing spirit over matter even when matter tempted you powerfully? By the fourth day, Cayce's readings indicated, the soul begins to experience what he called planes of consciousness, or dimensional realms that exist beyond physical perception. These aren't physical places with geographic locations. They're states of spiritual vibration, and the soul gravitates toward the plane that matches its level of spiritual development. Those who lived with Christ consciousness, who embodied love and service and divine awareness, naturally ascend toward higher planes where light is brilliant and communion with advanced souls is possible. Those who lived in hatred, materialism, selfishness, or spiritual ignorance find themselves in lower planes, not as punishment, but as natural consequence of the vibrations they cultivated during life. Cayce was clear that these planes exist in hierarchies. Some souls find themselves in what he called earthbound states, still so attached to physical pleasures, possessions, or people that they hover near the material world, trying desperately to interact with it, but unable to affect it as they once did. Others reach what he termed resting planes, where healing occurs, where souls damaged by difficult lives recover and prepare for their next steps. Still others ascend immediately to teaching planes, where advanced souls work on cosmic projects, assist other souls' development, and grow in divine understanding. The fifth and sixth days, according to Cayce, often bring the soul face to face with what might be called cosmic memory or the Akashic records. Though the soul doesn't access all of it, only the portions relevant to its own journey. Here, the soul begins to understand its complete history across multiple incarnations. It sees patterns, the same lessons attempted again and again, the same relationships reappearing in different forms, the spiritual progress made or not made across centuries of existence. This broader view allows the soul to comprehend why its most recent life unfolded as it did, what it was trying to learn, where it succeeded and where it failed. This is when many souls experience what Cayce called the planning phase, though not all souls are ready for it immediately. Those who've achieved certain levels of awareness begin to understand what their next incarnation might need to address. They see the karma they created, the imbalances they need to correct, the soul growth still required. Advanced souls might even begin choosing the circumstances of their next life, the parents, the challenges, the opportunities that will provide the precise conditions for learning what they need to learn next. But here's what Cayce emphasized about these middle days. Not every soul is ready to engage this process consciously. Some souls, traumatized by violent deaths or lives of deep suffering, need extended healing periods before they can review anything or plan anything. Others who lived in complete materialism or spiritual denial may not even comprehend that this planning is possible. They drift, confused, experiencing fragments of memory and emotion without the spiritual framework to make sense of any of it. By the seventh day, Cayce revealed, a crucial threshold is reached. The soul must choose, consciously or unconsciously, whether to continue ascending toward higher planes or to remain in borderland states attached to earthly concerns. For those who've lived with spiritual awareness, who prepared for this transition through meditation, prayer, and conscious soul development, this choice is clear and natural. They feel drawn upward toward light, toward divine presence, toward reunion with spiritual source. The pull is irresistible because it represents everything their soul truly desired, even when their physical mind was distracted by worldly concerns. But for souls unprepared, this seventh day can bring crisis. They feel the pull upward, but also feel terror at leaving everything familiar. They see loved ones still living and cannot bear to leave them. They have unfinished business, things they meant to say, wrongs they meant to right, purposes they meant to fulfill. The spiritual guides and helpers are there, offering assistance, trying to help the soul understand that holding on to the physical world serves no purpose and only delays its evolution. Yet free will remains sacred even in death, and no soul is forced to ascend before it's ready. Cayce describes souls who choose to linger in earthbound states for what seems like years, decades, even centuries by Earth time. They haunt familiar places, trying to communicate with the living, growing increasingly frustrated at their inability to affect physical reality. They watch their loved ones grieve and desperately try to say, "I'm here, I'm alive, just in a different form." But their messages rarely get through except in dreams or to those who've developed psychic sensitivity. These souls become what mediums encounter, genuine spirits trapped between worlds, not malevolent necessarily, but confused and in need of help, recognizing that their true home lies in higher dimensions, not in clinging to a world they've already left. What determines whether a soul ascends smoothly or becomes trapped? Cayce's readings pointed to specific factors, and they're not what conventional religion might suggest. It isn't about whether you attended church or performed rituals correctly. It's about consciousness, specifically whether you developed spiritual awareness during physical life, whether you understood yourself as a spiritual being having a physical experience rather than a physical being hoping for a spiritual afterlife. Souls who meditated regularly, who practiced conscious connection with divine presence, who saw their daily lives as spiritual training grounds, these souls recognize the afterlife terrain immediately. It's not foreign to them. They've visited these planes in dreams and meditation. They know the helpers and guides because they've sensed their presence throughout life. The transition feels like coming home, like removing uncomfortable clothing, like waking from a dream into greater reality. But souls who lived entirely in material consciousness, who never questioned the primacy of physical existence, who identified completely with body and ego and worldly role, these souls are like travelers arriving in a foreign country without maps, unable to speak the language, not knowing the customs. Every experience feels strange and threatening. The helpers appear as alien beings. The life review feels like accusation rather than learning. The higher planes seem like fantasies rather than destinations. This is why Cayce insisted repeatedly that preparation for death is the most important work anyone can do during physical life. Not morbid preoccupation with mortality, but conscious spiritual development, learning to meditate, to connect with your soul's deeper knowing, to recognize that your true identity transcends your physical form. Every time you choose compassion over judgment, service over selfishness, awareness over unconsciousness, you're building the spiritual muscles you'll need to navigate these first 7 days successfully. Consider what you're doing with your life right now. Are you developing your consciousness, or are you putting it to sleep with distractions and addictions? Are you strengthening your connection to divine presence through prayer and meditation, or are you letting that connection atrophy through neglect? Are you living as if this physical life is all that exists, or are you preparing for the far longer journey your soul will take through spiritual dimensions? Cayce also revealed something that challenges conventional thinking about grief and the mourning process. When loved ones grieve intensely, holding on to the departed soul with desperate emotional need, it actually makes the soul's transition more difficult. The departed soul feels that pull, feels the pain of those left behind, and often lingers trying to comfort them instead of moving forward into its own spiritual evolution. This doesn't mean we shouldn't grieve. Grief is natural and healthy, but Cayce suggested that the highest love we can offer the departed is to release them with blessing, to trust that they're continuing their journey, to focus our grief into prayers for their safe passage rather than desperate pleas for them to somehow return or remain connected to earthly concerns. The prayers that help most, according to Cayce, are those asking for the soul's protection, for divine guidance to surround them, for clarity of consciousness as they navigate new realms. These prayers create spiritual light around the departed soul, making it easier for them to see the path forward, easier to recognize the helpers and guides, easier to resist the temptation to cling to physical existence. In this sense, those still living can actively assist the departed's transition, can serve as spiritual support even though we exist in different dimensions. By the end of these 7 days, most souls have made their choice and their initial adjustment to non-physical existence. Some have ascended to higher planes and begun their continued evolution in spiritual dimensions. Others have settled into resting planes where healing and learning occur. Still others remain earthbound, struggling with attachments and unfinished business. But the period of maximum vulnerability has passed. The soul has either recognized its new reality or has dug into denial. The helpers have either been accepted or rejected. The path forward has either become clear or remains obscured by confusion. What Cayce wanted people to understand most deeply is that these 7 days and the state of consciousness the soul carries into them are determined by how we live now. Every day of physical life is preparation for this transition. Every choice to grow spiritually or remain in comfortable unconsciousness affects how that future transition will unfold. The soul that spends its physical life developing awareness, practicing meditation, studying spiritual truth, serving others with love, that soul will find these 7 days to be a magnificent adventure, a return to spiritual home, a liberation into greater consciousness. But the soul that wastes its physical life in pursuit of fleeting pleasures, accumulation of meaningless possessions, and maintenance of ego illusions, that soul will find these 7 days to be terrifying, confusing, a journey through unfamiliar territory without maps or guides it recognizes. The afterlife isn't designed to punish such souls. The universe doesn't judge. But natural spiritual law operates with perfect precision. You gravitate toward the plane of consciousness you've developed. You experience the reality your thoughts and beliefs create. You face the karma your actions generated. So here's the question that should haunt you, that should drive you to examine your life with ruthless honesty. If you died tonight, if your heart stopped beating in the next hour, would you be ready for what Cayce described? Would you recognize the helpers coming to guide you? Would your life review reveal a pattern of spiritual growth or spiritual stagnation? Would you ascend naturally toward higher planes, or would you be trapped in confusion, clinging to a physical world you can no longer affect? Have you built the consciousness that allows smooth transition, or have you so identified with your physical existence that death will seem like annihilation rather than transformation? These aren't theoretical questions. They're the most practical considerations any person can contemplate. Because death is coming, for you, for me, for everyone reading this. Not someday in the distant future necessarily, but possibly today, possibly in the next moment. And when it comes, there will be no more time to prepare. The consciousness you've developed or failed to develop will be what you carry into those crucial first 7 days. The spiritual awareness you've cultivated or neglected will determine whether you experience death as a return to your true home or as exile into frightening unknown territory. Cayce's message isn't meant to terrify but to motivate. You have time now. You have opportunity now. Every meditation session strengthens your spiritual awareness. Every act of selfless service builds soul qualities that will serve you in dimensions beyond this one. Every moment you choose love over fear, consciousness over unconsciousness, spirit over matter. You're preparing for the greatest journey you'll ever take, the journey that begins the moment your physical heart stops beating and your soul's heart begins to recognize its eternal nature. What are you doing today to prepare for those first 7 days? What spiritual practices are you committing to? What consciousness are you developing? What karma are you creating that will face you in that life review? These questions aren't morbid. They're the most vital inquiries any serious spiritual seeker can pursue. Your answers will determine whether death becomes your greatest fear or your greatest liberation. If this exploration of Edgar Cayce's teachings on the first 7 days after death has challenged your assumptions about mortality and consciousness, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to this channel. We're creating a community of serious spiritual seekers who want truth, not comfortable illusions, who are willing to face the deep questions about existence, death, and soul evolution that most people avoid their entire lives. And as we conclude, sit with this final reflection from Cayce's readings. Death is not a punishment, not an ending, not a tragedy. It's a transition from one classroom to another, from one plane of learning to the next. But the student who enters the new classroom unprepared, who didn't do the required work in the previous class, will struggle unnecessarily. The student who prepared consciously, who developed the required skills and awareness, will thrive. Which kind of student are you becoming? Your life right now is the preparation. These first 7 days after death will reveal whether you used that preparation time wisely or squandered it, chasing illusions that hold no value in spiritual dimensions. Choose wisely, prepare consciously, live as if your eternal soul's journey matters more than your temporary physical comfort, because it does. Share in the comments which aspect of these first 7 days challenges you most to examine how you're living right now. What changes do you feel called to make in your spiritual preparation? Let's support each other in this most important work, preparing our consciousness for the ultimate transition we'll all face. Most people spend their entire lives preparing for everything, except the one thing that's absolutely certain. And Edgar Cayce's readings reveal that the mistakes we make in our final moments can shape our soul's journey for lifetimes to come. In his deep trance states, Cayce witnessed how souls cross over, and what he discovered should terrify anyone living unconsciously. The dying process isn't just a physical event. It's the most spiritually consequential transition your soul will ever make. And most people stumble through it completely unprepared, creating karmic debts that follow them across incarnations. Cayce's readings showed that what you think, feel, and focus on in your last hours literally programs the frequency at which your soul enters the afterlife, determining whether you ascend toward the light or remain trapped in confusion and earthbound attachment. The tragedy is that these mistakes are completely avoidable if you understand what's actually happening when the silver cord begins to separate. Are you preparing for the most important journey your soul will ever take? Or are you making the same fatal errors that trap millions in lower astral planes? Share in the comments what scares you most about dying unprepared. When Edgar Cayce entered his self-induced trance states and accessed the Akashic records, he witnessed something that changed how we understand death forever. He saw that the moment of transition isn't an ending, but a cosmic graduation ceremony, and most souls fail the test because they're completely unprepared for what happens when consciousness separates from flesh. The sleeping prophet's readings revealed a truth that contradicts everything mainstream religion teaches about death. Your final thoughts, your last emotional state, and the spiritual frequency you've cultivated throughout your life don't just matter. They become the coordinates that determine exactly where your consciousness travels in the afterlife realms. This isn't metaphorical. Cayce described the dying process with the precision of a mystical cartographer mapping invisible dimensions, and what he discovered should shake every person who's living on spiritual autopilot. The first critical mistake people make at the end of life is clinging to the physical world with terror instead of surrendering with spiritual awareness. Cayce's readings showed that when the silver cord, that ethereal connection between your soul and body, begins to loosen, your consciousness enters a hypersensitive state where every thought and emotion amplifies exponentially. Fear at this moment acts like spiritual gravity, literally anchoring your soul to the earthly plane when it should be ascending toward higher vibrations. Think about what this means. In those final hours, when you should be releasing earthly attachments and preparing your consciousness for dimensional transition, most people panic. They grip onto their bodies, their possessions, their relationships, their unfinished business, and this desperate clinging creates energetic chains that keep them tethered to the physical realm even after the body stops functioning. Cayce witnessed souls trapped in what he called the borderland, unable to fully transition because they refused to let go when it mattered most. Are you living in a way that prepares you to release everything peacefully? Or are you building attachments that will become spiritual shackles when your time comes. The second devastating mistake revealed in Cayce's readings is dying with unresolved hatred, resentment, or unforgiveness, poisoning your consciousness. He saw clearly that whatever emotional state dominates your awareness at death becomes the lens through which you experience the initial afterlife journey. If you cross over consumed by bitterness towards someone who wronged you, that dark emotion doesn't disappear with your last breath. It intensifies and becomes the vibrational frequency that attracts you to corresponding realms in the afterlife. This is where most people catastrophically fail their spiritual evolution. They spend years, sometimes decades, nurturing grievances, replaying betrayals, feeding anger toward those who hurt them. Then death arrives suddenly, a heart attack, an accident, an unexpected illness, and they transition while still carrying that toxic emotional baggage. Cayce's readings showed that souls who die in states of hatred or unforgiveness often find themselves in lower astral planes surrounded by entities vibrating at the same frequency of darkness and confusion. The spiritual law is absolute and unforgiving, like attracts like in the afterlife dimensions. Your consciousness gravitates toward the realm that matches your dominant vibration. Die in anger, and you'll wake in realms of anger. Die in fear, and you'll find yourself surrounded by fear-based entities and experiences. Die clutching resentment, and you'll be magnetically drawn to planes where souls endlessly replay their grievances without resolution. What unresolved emotional wounds are you carrying right now that could become your spiritual prison if you died today? The third critical error Cayce identified is living an entire lifetime disconnected from your soul's purpose and then trying to figure it out when it's too late. His readings revealed that every soul incarnates with a specific mission, lessons to learn, karmic debts to balance, and gifts to share with the world. When you spend your entire life chasing material success, social approval, or ego gratification, instead of fulfilling your soul's actual purpose, you arrive at death's door with the crushing realization that you wasted your incarnation. Cayce saw this tragedy play out repeatedly in his readings. Souls who spent decades accumulating wealth, building businesses, achieving fame, or pursuing pleasure, only to discover in their final moments that none of it mattered, because they ignored the one thing their soul actually came here to accomplish. The anguish of this realization at death is spiritually devastating. These souls often experience profound confusion and regret in the afterlife, understanding too late that they'll have to reincarnate and start all over again to complete the mission they abandoned. The readings were clear. Your soul chose this lifetime with intentionality. Before you were born, you selected your parents, your circumstances, your challenges, and your opportunities because they would create the perfect conditions for your spiritual evolution. When you ignore that divine blueprint and live according to society's programming instead of your soul's guidance, you're not just wasting time, you're actively sabotaging your cosmic education. Have you asked yourself honestly whether you're living the life your soul intended, or are you following a script someone else wrote for you? Cayce's readings revealed a fourth mistake that haunts countless souls: dying with your spiritual gifts unused and your divine potential unexpressed. Every person incarnates with unique abilities, talents, and capacities to channel divine light into the world. Some are natural healers, others are teachers, artists, visionaries, or way showers who can help others awaken. But fear, insecurity, and conformity pressure cause most people to bury these gifts and live diminished lives. The tragedy Cayce witnessed was profound. Imagine standing before the Akashic records after death, reviewing your entire lifetime, and seeing clearly all the moments when you could have spoken truth but stayed silent, when you could have shared your healing gifts but held back out of fear of judgment, when you could have created beauty or wisdom but chose safety instead. The spiritual regret of unexpressed potential is one of the deepest sorrows a soul can experience. This isn't about fame or external recognition. Cayce's readings showed that your soul doesn't care if anyone applauds your gifts. What matters cosmically is whether you had the courage to express what wanted to come through you, whether you allowed yourself to be a clear channel for divine energy to flow into the world. When you suppress this expression out of fear or false humility, you're not protecting yourself, You're committing spiritual malpractice against your own soul's evolution. What gifts are you withholding from the world because you're afraid of being fully seen? The fifth mistake revealed in Cayce's readings cuts even deeper, dying without ever developing a genuine relationship with the Christ consciousness, the divine spark within you. This isn't about religious affiliation or church attendance. Cayce's readings showed that Christ consciousness is the highest vibrational frequency available to human souls, the actual presence of God expressing through individualized awareness. Most people spend their entire lives treating this sacred relationship like an afterthought, assuming they can establish divine connection later, when it's more convenient. But death doesn't wait for convenience. Cayce saw that souls who never cultivated this inner relationship while alive find themselves confused and disoriented in the afterlife. They don't know how to navigate spiritual dimensions because they never practiced while in physical form. They can't recognize divine guidance because they never learned to listen to that still small voice within. They're like spiritual children suddenly expected to navigate complex realms without any preparation or inner compass. The readings emphasized repeatedly that your connection to Christ consciousness, to that divine presence within, should be the foundation of your entire life. This means daily meditation, prayer, contemplation, and sincere effort to align your will with divine will. It means choosing love over fear, service over selfishness, truth over comfort. It means treating every moment as practice for the ultimate transition you'll eventually face. If you died right now, would you know how to navigate toward the light, or would you wander in confusion because you never practiced recognizing divine presence? Cayce's readings revealed a sixth devastating mistake: spending your entire life seeking happiness in external circumstances, instead of cultivating inner peace that transcends conditions. He saw souls who made their emotional state completely dependent on whether circumstances were favorable, relationships were satisfying, health was good, finances were stable. Then death strips away all external props simultaneously, and these souls discover they never developed any internal spiritual foundation to stand on. This creates a crisis of consciousness in the afterlife. Your emotional state isn't determined by circumstances anymore, because physical circumstances no longer exist. The only thing determining your experience is your internal spiritual development, the qualities of consciousness you actually cultivated while alive. Souls who spent lifetimes reacting to external events instead of developing inner mastery find themselves completely lost in dimensions where consciousness creates reality directly. The spiritual principle is absolute. Whatever inner qualities you develop while in physical form become your eternal possessions. Patience, compassion, forgiveness, faith, courage, peace, love, these aren't just nice character traits. They're spiritual capacities that determine your power to navigate afterlife dimensions and your readiness for higher realms of consciousness. If you never develop them while alive, you don't magically receive them at death. Are you building internal spiritual qualities that will serve you eternally? Or are you still depending on external circumstances to determine your peace? The seventh critical error Cayce identified is living as though death is some distant event that won't happen to you for decades, instead of recognizing that every single day is preparation for your cosmic graduation. His readings showed that the souls who transition most gracefully are those who lived as if they could die at any moment, not in morbid fear, but in spiritual readiness and present moment awareness. This doesn't mean obsessing over death. It means living with such intentionality, such consciousness, such alignment with your soul's purpose, that you could release your body at any moment without regret. It means speaking words today that you'd be proud to have as your last words. It means treating people with love today as if you won't get another chance tomorrow. It means doing your soul's work today instead of postponing it for some day that may never come. Cayce witnessed the profound peace of souls who lived this way, fully present, fully committed to their spiritual growth, fully engaged in fulfilling their purpose. When death came for them, it wasn't a tragedy or interruption. It was simply the next step in a journey they'd been consciously walking all along. Compare this to souls who spent decades in spiritual procrastination, always planning to get serious about their development later, and then death arrived before later ever came. If you died tonight, would your soul feel peaceful about how you spent today? The eighth mistake revealed in Cayce's readings is perhaps the most tragic. Dying still identified primarily with your ego personality instead of your eternal soul. He saw that most people spend their entire lives building and defending a false self, a constructed identity based on name, profession, social status, possessions, accomplishments, relationships. Then, death systematically strips away every element of this false identity, and they discover they don't know who they actually are. This creates existential terror in the afterlife. Without your job title, your bank account, your physical appearance, your social roles, your achievements, who are you? If you spent your whole life believing you were those external labels instead of an eternal spiritual being temporarily using them, death reveals the catastrophic mistake. You invested everything in building a sandcastle that the tide of death washes away in moments. Cayce's readings emphasize that the essential spiritual work of every lifetime is recognizing yourself as an individualized expression of divine consciousness, a soul on an eternal journey of evolution, temporarily inhabiting a physical form, but never reducible to it. When you know yourself this way while alive, death can't threaten your sense of identity. You're simply releasing one temporary vehicle and preparing to continue your journey in new form. Do you know yourself as an eternal soul using a temporary personality? Or have you made the fatal error of believing you are the temporary personality? The ninth critical mistake Cayce identified is dying with your consciousness cluttered with trivial concerns, mundane worries, and meaningless distractions, instead of focused on eternal spiritual realities. His readings showed that whatever dominates your attention and awareness during life becomes exponentially magnified at death. If you spent your entire life obsessed with celebrity gossip, sports scores, social media drama, political arguments, and entertainment consumption, that's the mental frequency you'll carry into the afterlife. This might sound harmless until you understand what Cayce revealed about afterlife dimensions. Your consciousness gravitates toward realms that match your habitual mental frequencies. Souls whose awareness is filled with trivial earthly concerns often find themselves trapped in lower astral planes that mirror earthly existence, endlessly replaying meaningless dramas, unable to ascend to higher spiritual dimensions because their consciousness lacks the elevation and refinement to perceive them. The spiritual law is uncompromising. You rise to the level of consciousness you actually developed while in physical form. If you trained your mind to focus on eternal truths, divine principles, and cosmic realities, death opens doors to magnificent spiritual dimensions. If you trained your mind to fixate on temporary, trivial, earthly concerns, death confines you to realms that reflect that limited awareness until you eventually elevate your consciousness through understanding. What fills your mind most of the day? Eternal spiritual realities or temporary earthly distractions? Cayce's readings revealed a 10th devastating mistake: dying having never seriously questioned the beliefs you inherited from family, culture, and religion, instead of developing genuine spiritual understanding through direct experience. He saw souls who spent entire lifetimes reciting religious doctrines they never examined, following rituals they never understood, and claiming beliefs they never personally verified through mystical experience. Then death reveals whether those inherited beliefs were actually true or just comforting stories. Souls who based their entire spiritual framework on unexamined second-hand beliefs often experience profound disorientation in the afterlife when reality doesn't match what they were taught. They expected harps and clouds or eternal darkness, but instead encountered multidimensional realms of consciousness that their narrow belief systems never prepared them for. This is why Cayce emphasized direct spiritual experience over blind belief. Meditation, prayer, contemplation, mystical states, divine guidance. These aren't luxuries for spiritual elites. They're essential practices that allow you to verify spiritual truths through personal experience while you're still alive. When you've actually experienced the divine presence within, when you've touched Christ consciousness in meditation, when you've received genuine spiritual guidance, death can't shake your foundation because your knowing isn't based on someone else's teaching, but on your own direct encounter with sacred reality. Are your spiritual beliefs based on what others told you, or on what you've personally experienced and verified. The final mistake Cayce identified might be the most heartbreaking, dying having spent your entire life waiting for permission, approval, or perfect conditions to finally start living authentically, expressing your truth and fulfilling your soul's purpose. His readings showed countless souls who postponed their real lives indefinitely, always waiting for circumstances to improve, for other people to change, for fear to disappear, for conditions to become ideal. Death doesn't care about your excuses or your someday plans. It arrives on its own schedule, often when you least expect it, and it doesn't give you extra time to finally become who you were meant to be. Cayce witnessed the profound anguish of souls reviewing their lives after death and seeing clearly all the ways they held themselves back, played small, silenced their truth, and abandoned their purpose, not because circumstances prevented them, but because they were waiting for permission that never came. The spiritual reality is absolute. No one is coming to give you permission to live your soul's purpose. No external authority will validate your spiritual gifts or approve your divine mission. The universe is waiting for you to claim your power, express your truth, and fulfill your purpose, regardless of whether anyone else understands or approves. Every day you wait is a day of your divine mission left unfulfilled, and you don't know how many days you have left. What are you waiting for before you finally start living as the powerful spiritual being you actually are? These aren't abstract philosophical concepts. Every single mistake Cayce identified has direct, concrete, eternal consequences for your soul's journey. The tragedy is that most people remain completely unconscious of these spiritual realities until death forces awakening, and by then, the opportunity to prepare has passed. But here's the profound gift hidden in Cayce's challenging message. Every single one of these mistakes is completely avoidable if you wake up now. You can choose today to release attachments instead of waiting until death forces the release. You can forgive today instead of carrying resentment to your grave. You can align with your soul's purpose today instead of wasting another year in meaningless pursuits. You can develop your spiritual gifts today instead of dying with your potential unexpressed. You can cultivate Christ consciousness today instead of arriving at death spiritually unprepared. The real question facing you isn't whether you'll die, that's guaranteed. The question is whether you'll wake up before you die. Will you use your remaining time, however long or short it may be, to make the spiritual preparations that will determine your soul's trajectory for lifetimes to come? Or will you continue sleepwalking through your days, making the same mistakes that have trapped countless souls in lower realms and endless reincarnation cycles? If you found this message challenging, that's good. Spiritual complacency is one of the biggest mistakes of all. Hit that like button if you're ready to stop making excuses and start making real spiritual progress. Subscribe to this channel because we're committed to sharing Cayce's most challenging and transformative teachings, the ones that force honest self-examination instead of offering easy comfort. And drop a comment sharing which of these mistakes you recognize in your own life and what you're going to change starting today. Your soul is on a cosmic journey that extends far beyond this single lifetime. The mistakes you make at the end of this life will shape the beginning of your next journey. Edgar Cayce gave us the map, showed us the pitfalls, and revealed the spiritual laws that govern the dying process. What you do with this knowledge is the test of whether you're truly ready to graduate to higher consciousness or whether you'll repeat these same devastating patterns again. The universe isn't going to force you to wake up. That choice has always been yours. But time is the one resource you can never recover, and your opportunity to prepare for death is diminishing with every passing moment. Don't wait until you're on your deathbed to finally take your spiritual evolution seriously. Start now. The greatest mistake isn't dying unprepared, it's having the knowledge of how to prepare and choosing not to use it.